Good morning. Happy holidays to everyone, and welcome to today's virtual seminar, Ready for Retirement, brought to you by the Massachusetts Teachers Retirement System. I'm Jonathan Osimo, Assistant Executive Director of Member Services, and we hope you're able to stay safe, warm, and festive over the long holiday weekend. At the MTRS, we strive to serve you, our members, in the best way possible at all times. And one of the ways that we do that is by offering the seminar that you're attending right now. We have a lot of topics to cover today, but first, we want everyone to know that throughout the presentation, you can ask questions through the Q&A feature. And we have staff here today dedicated to answering as many questions as possible. We'll answer some questions for the whole group during the presentation as well. You should have received an email with a PDF version of the program booklet for today, which follows along this presentation and also contains a lot of additional information that you can refer to after the presentation today. Now let's look at what we're covering during today's seminar. This presentation is broken into three parts. In part one, I'm going to cover pre-retirement issues, what you need to know and considerations you need to make before you retire. I'll cover creditable service, the retirement formula, the retirement options, and then we'll look at some sample benefit calculations. Then in part two, John Lapriori, Director of Member Services North, will take you through the application process, which is a step-by-step walkthrough of the application itself and what you need to do and what you can expect and when. And then he will finish it up in part three with other retirement issues, ancillary issues, topics that you need to be aware of as you approach retirement. Before we get into the presentation itself, this slide is not in the program booklet. I do want to talk about Chapter 134, the Acts of 2022, which was enacted back in the summer. We call this the R+ new legislation. This new legislation allows an opportunity to elect to participate in Retirement Plus only for members who transferred into the MTRS from another mass public retirement system between July 1st, 2001 and June 30th, 2022, and who did not yet submit an election to either participate in Retirement Plus or not to participate in Retirement Plus. This new election period begins on January 1st, 2023 and ends on June 30th, 2023. You must respond, if eligible, you must respond by June 30th, 2023, or you will not be enrolled in Retirement Plus. What's very important here is that this election opportunity does not include members who already had the opportunity to elect in Retirement Plus back in 2001. So if you were a member in service in 2001 and you had the opportunity to elect to participate in Retirement Plus, but you did not do so, this new legislation does not affect you. We've received many questions, phone calls, emails on this over the last several months, and unfortunately, it does not allow an opportunity for election if you did not elect to participate back in 2001. We will be sending all eligible members an election form in January. So if you are eligible and you do receive this form, it's important and you want to participate in Retirement Plus that you elect to do so before June 30th, 2023. The MTRS is a defined benefit plan, a DB plan, operated under Section 401A of the IRS code. I think everyone out there is familiar with 401ks, which is a defined contribution plan. We're a defined benefit plan under 401A, which means that the benefits are determined according to a set formula and paid monthly for life. So, as we all know, the financial markets have been pretty volatile as of late, but fluctuations in the financial markets do not affect the amount of your benefits. The pension fund is invested in a well-diversified portfolio, and the focus is on long-term returns. Back in 2011, the Pension Reform 3 law was enacted and created a separate benefit tier, which we call Benefit Tier 2. So if you became a member of our system before April 2nd of 2012, you are in Benefit Tier 1. Anyone who began membership on or after April 2nd of 2012 is in Benefit Tier 2. Now this program today, the benefits that we'll be discussing are for Benefit Tier 1, not for Benefit Tier 2. There is reference material and information in the program booklet on Benefit Tier 2, but for this program today, it will be for Benefit Tier 1. Under Benefit Tier 2, the minimum age to retire was increased from 55 to 60. The average salary years was increased from 3 to 5 years for the benefit calculation, and the age factors used to calculate benefits were also reduced under Benefit Tier 2. But there is more information not only in the booklet, but also on our website. During your membership, you're contributing a % of your salary to us. Your retirement contributions are coming in based on your salary from your school district, but not all earnings that you receive, not all pay you receive is considered pensionable, what the law refers to as regular compensation, or what will be used to calculate your retirement benefits. So what is included in regular compensation? It's your annual base salary per your collective bargaining agreement or your individual contract. It also includes your regular longevity, as well as any athletic coaching. So if you're receiving pay for being the soccer coach, for example, that is included in your pensionable earnings. Any annual payments that you receive for additional services, that is part of your contract or your collective bargaining agreement, that also is included as a pensionable and or regular compensation. What isn't included is if you receive pay due to your district's knowledge of your retirement. So if you receive a retirement incentive as a result of giving notice, that is not considered regular compensation. Any sick leave buyback that you receive per your contract when you retire or you separate from service, that is not pensionable. Any unused vacation or hourly payments are also not considered pensionable, not regular compensation for retirement purposes. Any temporary salary augmentation, this was commonly referred to as elbow plans, enhanced longevity buyout plans. Those are no longer considered to be regular compensation. And any annuities and or fringe benefits that you receive is not pensionable either. So aside from accruing regular service credit as you contribute to the MTRS, you can also purchase service, and there are 10 different types of service that is available for purchase. Now, not everyone's going to be eligible for each of these types of service, and there's much more information not only online, but on page 5 of the program booklet. Each type has specific criteria and limits as to how much service can be purchased. And so I would refer to that for more information. If you were a member of our system and then took a refund of your contributions, you left service and took your money out, and then became a member again, reinstated to service, you can buy that back. It's called the refund buyback. If you had any Massachusetts state municipal employment where you were not contributing to another retirement system, that can be purchased as well. Massachusetts substitute or temporary teaching. This is very common across our membership. Before you started to contribute to the system, before you became a permanent teacher, for example, you may have done some daily subbing or some long-term subbing where you weren't contributing to a retirement system. That can be purchased. You may have done some teaching out of state, so you can purchase some out-of-state public school teaching service, a non-public school service prior to 1973 in a private school. We don't see many of those, obviously, due to the length of time there, but that is allowed for purchase. And these first list here of available types of service that can be purchased are going to be billed by us at the actuarial interest rate. So there's two different interest rates that are used to calculate the cost of the service. And the actuarial interest rate right now is at 7%. So the first 6 types of service purchase here on the list are billed at that 7% actuarial interest rate. You may have done some overseas dependent school teaching for the Department of Defense. That's another type of service that can be purchased. And again, actuarial interest will be applied to the cost. And then what's billed at the buyback rate, and buyback rate is 1/2 of the actuarial rate. So that's 3.5% as an interest rate. If you may have had some Peace Corps service or some vocational education service experience that you can purchase, or some non-public school teaching in a mass publicly funded school, or some military service. All of these types of service are available. If you believe that they apply to you, then you do want to check out the criteria on page 5. You do want to find out some more information, which is available on our website. There's some very important reminders here that you want to be aware of when it comes to buying service. And that's why we have the finger with the string. We want you to remember these important reminders. You must be an active member at the time that you make application in order for the service to be eligible for purchase, with the exception of Peace Corps service and refund buybacks. All of your service purchases must be paid in full prior to your date of retirement. And you want to make sure you get all those payments in, because you don't want to hold up or delay your retirement payments, the start of your retirement payments. So late payments could postpone the retirement date, your retirement date, and then delay those payments from beginning. So if you think that you do have some service that you could purchase, you want to complete that now, again, just because you don't want there to be delays with regard to the start of your retirement payments. Sometimes it's difficult to document service as well. You may have done service 20 years ago that you're trying to purchase, and it's difficult for those payroll records. They could have been lost. There could have been floods. The records could be on paper. They could be down in the cellar. We sort of call that the cellar syndrome. I'm not sure that everybody enjoys going down into the cellar to look for some of those old employment records. So you want to take care of those service purchases now. And again, you want to avoid delays. And then it's often our members are taking advantage of the pre-tax rollover or trust transfers in order to pay for the service purchases. And sometimes that process will take a little time, so you will want to avoid any delays there. And if you are on our installment plan where you were paying a payment per year for 5 years, our 5-year installment plan, you want to make sure that that is paid in full prior to your retirement date as well. So you can call us and ask for your buyout cost to take care of that before you retire. If you are interested in purchasing service, you want to download the applicable service purchase form from our website, mass.gov/MTRS. You want to complete your sections of the service purchase applications. Typically, your former employer will complete their section of the application, and then you send that to us once it's completed. Typically, the cost of buying service includes the principal amount, which is your past earnings when you rendered the service, and then the applicable interest rate. We talked about that a few slides ago. Either the actuarial interest rate or the buyback interest rate is applied. There are some types of service purchases that have some special formulas, which are a little different than the formula that I just mentioned. But you can pay by either a personal check, a pre-tax rollover, or a trust-to-trust transfer from an eligible plan. But again, that process can take some time depending on your financial institution. You can participate in the 5-year installment plan to pay for your service purchase. But again, as a reminder, that must be paid before your date of retirement. This is not in your program booklet either, but we're going to go through a little bit of a true or false question here, and then we're going to take a few questions from you as well. So, true or false, in order to retire, all I need to do is submit a letter of my resignation to my school district, and then my school district will handle all the paperwork with the MTRS. Obviously, that's false. You must complete the retirement application. Part 1 is your section to complete. Part 2 is your district's section to complete. So you want to get that to your payroll officer, and you want to submit both Part 1 and Part 2 together with all the required documents, and that's how you file for retirement. So now we're going to take a few questions.
Great, John. Before the questions, just a couple of quick announcements to address some concerns in the QA. Many people are reporting that they did not receive the PDF of the slides. Those were sent with the reminder email that went out last week. If you still do not have a copy of the slides, they are available on our website, mass.gov/MTRS, and scroll down to member publications, and you'll see a link to both the Ready for Retirement and the Your MTRS Benefit program booklets. Additionally, we are recording this session, and it will be made available for playback on our website in a couple of days. So look for that, and we will send out an email to all registered attendees once that recording is ready. First question from the chat. I worked for 10 years as a teacher for Head Start. Might that be considered eligible for buyback?
Yes, the Head Start program, we are familiar with that. That would be possibly eligible for buyback. You would want to have that service documented on our other mass service purchase application.
A couple of people have asked in the chat, if I'm already contributing 11%, does that mean I am participating in Retirement Plus?
That's a complicated question, unfortunately, because we work with 400 different school districts across the state. These school districts don't always know if you are in Retirement Plus or not. So just because you are contributing at 11% does not necessarily mean you are in Retirement Plus. Those who participate in Retirement Plus do contribute at 11%, but not everyone who's contributing at 11% automatically is in Retirement Plus, unfortunately.
Who is responsible for keeping track of my service credit? Me, my employers, or the MTRS?
It's really a combination of the three, frankly, because again, as members of our system, we obviously have service credit information, but based on the way the information is stored, our old computer systems, it's not as easy as it sounds to compile a correct number. And Certainly, we send out thousands of creditable service estimates every year, and we try and help all our members out the best that we can with that information. But you are really the best source of information too for yourself and for your service. And then when you are working for employers, obviously they have service information too. And we often ask your former employers for information when trying to give you an accurate creditable service estimate.
One more question. I contributed to a municipal retirement system in Massachusetts. Is this automatically applied to my MTRS?
So if you were a member of one of the other 103 mass contributory retirement systems, that would transfer automatically to us if you left your money on account and you made sure that we knew that you had that prior service. We do send requests for transfer on a regular basis for prior service, and the money and the service credit would follow you as well. So the short answer is yes. But if you had that service with the other retirement system and took a refund of your contributions before becoming a member of the MTRS, then you could buy back that service as a refund buyback. So it could be a transfer situation or a possible refund buyback situation.
Want to take one more?
Sure.
If I apply to retire in 2 years, can I delay and work a third year?
Oh, could you repeat the question?
If I apply to retire in 2 years from now, can I delay and work a third year?
So you can always defer your retirement if you want to wait to start collecting because you want to increase your age factor. That is definitely possible, but you always want to consider the amount that you've given up when you decide to defer, because you have an amount that you're eligible for at a specific date and time, and then you are waiting or deferring or not collecting your retirement benefit for another time frame. So you want to take into account what you're giving up when you defer your retirement like that. All right, we're going to move on now. When can I retire, right? That's sort of the common question out there. In Tier 1, if you are at any age and you have 20 years of total creditable service, you are eligible for a retirement benefit. Or if you are at least age 55 with at least 10 years of creditable service, you are also eligible for a retirement benefit. And in order to take advantage of the Retirement Plus enhancement, you can be any age with at least 30 years of total creditable service, with at least 20 years of membership service with the MTRS. That's contributing service to the MTRS or to the Boston retirement system as a teacher. If you are eligible for the Retirement Plus enhancement at that 30 years, you will have an additional 12% added to your retirement percentage upon retirement. And then an additional 2% on top of that for each full year of service that you retire above 30 years. So at 31 years, it's 14%. At 32 years, it's 16%, and so on. When you actually decide to retire, you will choose a retirement option at that time. And there are 3 different retirement options to choose from. Option A is the most popular. 60% of our retirees last year chose option A. That's the maximum allowance. That's the straight calculation of age factor times years of service times your salary average will yield you your retirement benefit. Under option A, which is the maximum allowance, there is no survivor benefits associated with that option. So there's nothing left to a beneficiary upon your passing. Under option B, you're taking approximately 1 to 3% less than option A, but you are providing a one-time lump sum payment of the remaining balance in your annuity savings account to your beneficiary. There are no restrictions when naming an option B beneficiary. And then under option C, which is approximately 9 to 11% less than option A, you are not only providing a lifetime benefit for yourself, but also for your survivor. And that monthly lifetime benefit to your survivor is equal to 2/3 of what you were receiving. So you start receiving your benefit about 9 to 11% less than A, then you pass away, your option C beneficiary will receive 2/3 of what you were receiving when you passed away. There are restrictions to beneficiaries under option C. It has to be either your spouse, your parent, your child, your sibling, or your former spouse who has not remarried. Not a popular choice, obviously. Under option C, there is a pop-up provision so that if your option C beneficiary predeceases you, you automatically pop up to option A. We've talked a little bit about it already, but the retirement formula itself, which this is the nuts and bolts of the retirement system. When you think about the fact that it's a defined benefit plan, what are the factors that are part of the formula? And it starts with your age factor, which corresponds to your age. There is age factors in many locations in the program booklet, but you start with that factor, you multiply that by your total years of creditable service. That will give you a percentage, which if you are in Retirement Plus, you add the applicable Retirement Plus enhancement to that. That is multiplied by your 3-year salary average, and that will give you your option A allowance. Now, if you are a military veteran, then you can add the vet bonus if applicable, which is up to $300. And that is your total option A annual allowance. Let's take a look at an example here. Mary Educator, she is 59 years old at retirement, so her age factor is 0.019, multiplied by her years of creditable service, which is 35 years. That gives Mary a base percentage of 66.5%. Mary is not in Retirement Plus, so there is no Retirement Plus enhancement for Mary. So Mary's calculation option A annual benefit is that 66.5% times her 3-year salary average of $75,000. That gives Mary an annual benefit of $49,875. She is a military veteran, so that is added as well. So now Mary's annual option A allowance is $50,175 a year, or roughly $4,200 a month. Now let's take a look at another example here for Tom Teacher. Tom Teacher is in Retirement Plus, and he's retiring at the age of 58, so his age factor is 0.018. Tom's total creditable service is 34.5 years. So the 0.018 or 1.8% times 34.5 is 62.1%. That's Tom's base percentage. Now, Tom is in Retirement Plus, so he can add 20% to that 62.1%, but the cap is 80%. So Tom's total percentage is capped at 80%. That is multiplied by his 3-year salary average of $75,000, which gives Tom an annual benefit of $60,000. Tom is also a veteran, so we can add $300 to that annual benefit, so that Tom's total option A allowance is $60,300 per year, or just over $5,000 per month. Now, another major consideration when thinking about retiring is health insurance. Obviously, health insurance is not only important as an active member, but certainly will be very important to you in retirement. So you want to contact your insurance coordinator in your district to find out what happens when you retire. Are there percentages as far as the district's portion of paid premium, or your portion? Are they changing it all in retirement? We do not administer health insurance. That is still done by your district. We will act as a liaison between you and your district, and we will withhold your premiums from your retirement allowance. And then we work with the school districts on getting those premiums to them. So it is really a district issue. Some districts choose to participate in the Group Insurance Commission's retired municipal teachers insurance program, or the GIC municipality program, so that the GIC will administer the insurance, but it's still a district issue whether the district will participate in either of those programs. You want to find out from your district what happens when you turn age 65, and if you're eligible for Medicare, what kind of supplement will be offered to you in retirement. And you want to understand what happens if you are carrying insurance for your family and you pass away. Will there be survivor benefits for your survivor, health insurance benefits for your survivor, and what will the cost be? And you want to do this well in advance of making the decision to retire, because again, this is a major issue in retirement, and you just want to avoid as many surprises as possible. And again, another tip here, you do want to contact Social Security before age 65 to find out about your Medicare benefits, because if you wait until after 65, there could be some penalties associated with waiting till after you turn 65. All right, we have another question here. Myth or fact? When I retire, the beneficiary I had designated while active will automatically continue to be my beneficiary as a retiree. That is a myth. You have an active member beneficiary, and you have a retiree beneficiary associated with your option choice at retirement. So just because you have a beneficiary on file with us as an active member does not mean that will carry over automatically as a beneficiary as a retiree. And we will take a few more questions.
Great, John. The first question is calling back to the buyback section you were speaking to a few minutes ago. The question is, can you explain the payment plan that you were talking about, how to pay for buyback?
Sure. When you apply to purchase service and we send you an invoice with the cost, you can either pay by check, you can pay by pre-tax rollover or trust-to-trust transfer, or you can participate in our 5-year installment plan where you will pay one yearly payment for 5 years. So we do offer that installment plan, which is one payment every year for 5 years.
Great. Next question is, having contracted positions in over 10 Massachusetts school districts in 32 years, plus Rhode Island teaching, how far in advance would the MTRS recommend to apply for retirement, buybacks, etc.?
Well, we always recommend that you start the process as early as you can. Certainly, we've talked already about how long it could take to purchase service, and if there are issues with your regular service, whether it's in Massachusetts or out of state, you want to make sure that that service is documented properly, and you don't want any surprises. You know, you want to make sure that through the process, all of your expectations are met. So starting as early as possible is definitely the best way to go about that situation.
Great. One more. How do I get my creditable service estimate from the MTRS?
If you are looking for your creditable service estimate, you can go onto our website and complete the creditable service estimate request form. Send that into our office, and we will use information on the form. We will also use information we have in our system here. We may contact your former employers for additional information, but we will process your creditable service estimate on a first in, first out basis. All right, so that concludes part one of the presentation. I will now turn it over to John Lapriori.
Thank you, John, and good morning, everybody. Again, my name is John Lapriori. I'm the Director of Member Services for the North. And what I'll be doing is bringing you through the application process. And then later on, as I finish, I will also touch upon some ancillary issues and things to consider post-retirement. So there are three basic steps to know about as you go through the application process. And it's all based on timing. So 6 months prior to your retirement, you want to complete step one, which is to go online to the MTRS website, run through some benefit estimates. There is a benefit estimate calculator online that we encourage you to utilize. Part of that process would be to review some general issues. And then finally, you would be downloading the two-part retirement application. As John mentioned earlier, part one is the part of the application you would complete, with part two being the part your school district would complete. That process will begin roughly 5 months prior to your retirement. So that would be the point where you want to complete part one, make sure that you have gathered all of the required documents that would need to be submitted with the application. And at that point, you'd be giving part two to your payroll official to complete. 4 months prior to your retirement date, you want to make sure that you're receiving part two back from your payroll official, and you want to submit your application to us at that point. So just to sort of illustrate some of these steps, the first, as I mentioned, would be to go online. So you'd go to mass.gov/MTRS, and right on our home page, you want to go to the link that says Browse Topics by Career Stage. And in this particular case, you'll be clicking on Approaching Retirement. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. I just want to be able to show you where you can access the benefit estimator. So on that screen, you will be clicking on Estimate My Retirement Benefits. Again, this is encouraged to run through different retirement date scenarios, as well as different scenarios under particular options, A, B, or C. It will not prohibit you from getting to the application, but again, we do encourage you to go through and run through some different scenarios, just so you have a better sense on what your benefit might look like. The estimator that you'll be using is dependent upon your membership tier. Earlier, John mentioned that you would either be a tier 1 member or a tier 2 member. So depending on your tier, you would want to click on the applicable link to bring you to the correct benefit estimator. So once you've had a chance to play around with different scenarios and you're comfortable with the retirement date and your benefit option, you are now ready to get to the application. So you would go back to that screen we were on earlier. You would click on Apply for Retirement, and that would bring you to step one, which is to understand the retirement formula and process. There'll be a lot of information contained on this page that is covered by this presentation. So a lot of it may be, refresher and information that you'll definitely want to be up on as you head into the application for retirement. Once you have had a chance to go through step 1, you are now ready to actually download the retirement application. And you would do so by clicking on step 2. So this is an interactive PDF format, and you have the choice to either enter all the data as the application is on your computer screen, or if you want, you can print it and complete it by hand. But either way, whether you complete it on screen or you're printing it and completing it by hand, all signatures on the application must be wet signatures. They must be in ink. Otherwise, we will send it back to you. So just be sure that regardless of how you complete the application, all signatures must be wet signatures. And now I'll actually take you through the different pages of the application. So this is what page 1, the top of page 1 would look like. Part 1, section 1A is identifying the type of retirement benefit you're applying for. So you will either be applying for a regular retirement benefit, a retirement plus benefit, or an involuntary termination retirement benefit. We're asking you to also list your intended date of retirement, as well as your last date of employment. Now, for those of you who will be retiring at the end of this school year, or at the end of any school year, you're finishing the school year and then you're retiring, you're going to want to use June 30th as your retirement date, as well as your last date of employment. By law, you do need to use June 30th. So even though your school year may be over, June 22nd, we're still asking you to list June 30th as both dates, your intended date of retirement, as well as your last date of employment. And we will also ask you whether or not you are applying for a disability retirement benefit. Here is the bottom of page 1. We're just asking you to list your social security number, your member number if known. If you don't know that, you can certainly contact us and we'll provide that to you. Your name, last name, any former names you may have had, date of birth. We want you to identify whether or not you are a veteran pursuant to Chapter 32. We're asking you to provide your current mailing address, phone numbers, and an email address. And the email address that you should be verifying would be a personal email address as opposed to your school's email address. Here is page 2. So part 1, section 2K, we're asking you to identify the school districts by which you're currently employed. Most of you will just have one school district, but some of you could be part-time in more than one school district. So here we want you to list your current employers. Section 2I, we're asking you whether or not you are now or were at any time on or before January 1st, 2010, concurrently employed by more than one Massachusetts town, city, county, state, or regional authority. If so, dual membership rules may come into play. So we want you to fill out this section if it applies to you. The next question, we're asking you to identify whether or not you are retiring under the age of 55 and also married to someone who has already retired under one of our mass contributory retirement systems. If you feel that if your spouse is retired already from one of the Massachusetts contributory retirement systems, and you are under the age of 55, and as of November 1st, 2003, had already both established membership in your respective retirement systems, you may qualify for the special spousal retirement benefit, which would boost your age up to 55. So in this section, we want you to identify yourself as someone who might meet that criteria. The bottom portion of page 2 is letting us know what your expected marital status is as of your intended date of retirement. We want you to identify your spouse. Have you ever been divorced? And if yes, is there a domestic relations order in effect? It's very important to identify that if that is the case. We also want you to provide an alternate address. So if your address will be different in retirement or prior to retirement, we want you to let us know what that address will be, because your first pension payment may come in the form of a check. And then we also may have other mailings that we want to provide, and we want to make sure that we have the right address. So do be sure to let us know if there will be an alternate address. And lastly, on page 2, we're asking whether or not you have ever been convicted of a criminal offense involving your Massachusetts public employment. Page 3 involves identifying your 3 highest consecutive years of salary. So as you know, your final salary average consists of your 3 highest consecutive years. They may not necessarily be your last 3 years, because they can be any other period of time. You may have had a different position where your 3 highest consecutive years were not your last 3. So in this section, we're asking you to provide the dates of those 3 highest consecutive years. We're also asking you whether or not at that time you're covered by a collective bargaining agreement or an individual contract. In either case, we want you to attach copies of the pages from the collective bargaining agreement that pertain to your base salaries, as well as any additional earnings you were paid that were covered by the collective bargaining agreement. So we want you to attach all of the pages from the CBA pertaining to those earnings. And then, of course, the same would go if you were covered by an individual contract. We want copies of those applicable signed contracts as well. There are additional questions if in fact you were covered by an individual contract, such as providing the earliest date that your employer had knowledge of retirement. Were any of your individual contracts covering your employment in the last 5 years amended that included retroactive pay? And then lastly, we're asking whether or not your school district has settled its contract for the current year. There are times where you'll be retiring, but you're working under an unsettled contract. If that is the case, once the contract settles and you've received retroactive pay under that settled contract, you would want to make sure that your payroll official provides us with the updated information so that we can do the proper retroactive benefit adjustment. And then lastly, you'll be signing and dating that page. Page 4 involves your creditable service history. So part 1, section 4, we're asking you to self-identify the different types of service you have rendered over the course of your career. Many of you have done service purchases, and they are all listed here. So to the best of your ability, we want you to identify all of the different types of service you have rendered, even if they have not yet been purchased or you have not yet applied for them. At the bottom of page 4, we're asking you to provide a little more detail on the different types of service you had rendered, such as the name of the employer, your position title, the from and to dates. Was it part-time service or full-time service? Is it service that's already been credited? Is it service that you plan to purchase? Or is it service that you do not plan to purchase? And then at the very bottom, we want you to do your best to come up with a sum of what you feel that service has accrued, the amount of service you feel that has accrued. We will end up using, this is just to give us a gauge on what your service credit looks like. We, of course, will go through all of your documented service in your file, all of the service that's been verified by your school system. This just gives us a snapshot of all of the service you have rendered. On page 5, we are asking you to identify any authorized leaves of absence, whether they were unpaid leaves or paid leaves. So you would enter that information in this section right here. On this page at the bottom, we're also asking you to identify any periods of workers' compensation payments you have received, whether it's for a full incapacity or a partial incapacity. We are also asking you to verify any military service you had rendered, whether it's service you have already purchased or it's a military service that you have applied to purchase but is still pending, or you have not yet applied to purchase. Page 6 will be your direct deposit authorization information. You can either utilize a checking account or a savings account. It is one or the other. You cannot split your monthly benefit payments. If you're using a checking account, you must attach a voided check to this page. If it's a savings account, we will definitely need your bank's signed official account verification document, which would include your name, address, bank name, routing number, and account number. It's important to remember that we will not accept a deposit slip. The next question is whether or not you're forwarding your payments to a foreign bank. It's a yes or no question. If it's left blank, your application would be considered incomplete. So make sure you're checking yes or no. The next is identifying whether or not your checks are going to an individual account, a joint account, or a trust. If it is a joint account, then the other person, as the joint account holder, must complete section 5B. And then finally, in section 5C, you're once again signing and dating that page. Now, page 7 is your option selection page. This is the page where you're actually choosing your option. And of course, it'll be option A, B, or C. It's important to remember that if you do have a domestic relations order on file, you must follow the terms of that domestic relations order, because sometimes the DRO will mandate you to take a specific option. So the options set forth in your court-executed DRO must match this page. It's also important to remember that once your retirement date has passed, you cannot change your retirement option. So if any point up until your date of retirement, you feel that you want to readdress the option that you've chosen, make sure that you're doing that before your retirement date hits. The bottom section is for option B and C. As John mentioned earlier, if you're choosing option C, it is only one beneficiary, and it's specific to being a parent, child, sibling, spouse, or former spouse who has not remarried. If you are choosing option C, please remember that we do need a certified copy of your option C beneficiary's birth certificate. And if it is a spouse that you're naming, we definitely need a photocopy of the applicable marriage certificate. And then don't forget, we need your signature and date at the bottom of that page. Page 8 will be the spousal acknowledgement page. The top section, you'll be identifying whether or not you are now married or expect to be married as of your intended retirement date. You also have the ability to verify that you have been divorced, and it is your understanding that there is or is not a domestic relations order on file, or you'll be choosing, I am not currently married and do not expect to be married as of my intended date of retirement. Your signature and date is required in that section. If you are married or will be married as of the date of your retirement, your spouse's signature, along with a witness's signature, must be provided. The date on which your spouse signs and the witness signs must be the same day and cannot be before the date you signed page 7, which is the option selection page. So the spousal date and the witness date must be the same, and it must be signed on or after the date the member completed Part 1, Section 6 on page 7. If the dates are prior to the date on page 7, we will send the retirement application back and we'll consider it incomplete. So just make sure that the dates that your spouse and the witness signs are the same date and are on or after the date on page 7. Page 9 would be the beneficiary page for options A and B. Now, there are no survivor benefits under option A other than upon your death, if there are any benefits earned in the month of your death that have not been paid out yet, that prorated portion of that month would be paid out in a lump sum to your option A beneficiaries. The percentage listed must equal exactly 100%. So if it's one person, it would be 100%. If you have more than one person, make sure that the total percentage is exactly 100%. The bottom of page 9 is to identify your option B beneficiary or beneficiaries. You also have the ability to name a contingent beneficiary or beneficiaries in the event that your primary beneficiaries are not alive at the time of your death. There will also be a W-4P form inserted for your federal tax withholding. Any questions when you complete this page should be addressed to either your accountant or a tax professional. And that is what the form, this is what the form will look like. And that would complete your section of the retirement application, Part 1. Now you're ready to turn Part 2 into your payroll department. You would complete Part 2, Section 1, and then give that to them so that they can complete it. If your salary average will be coming, it'll be a combination of more than one school districts, then you will need each of those school districts to complete a Part 2. So just keep that in mind. Once you receive Part 2 back from your school district or school districts, you want to make sure that you review everything for completeness. Make sure that all of the required documents are attached. Please be sure to make a photocopy of everything for your records. Make sure everything gets submitted together. So parts 1 and 2 should be submitted together at the same time. And once we have had a chance to review the application for completeness, we will notify you in writing. If something is missing, we will let you know exactly what is missing and let you know what you need to follow up with. Our applications are processed on a first come, first served basis. If there's a reason why we need to reach back out to your school district and we feel that it might cause a delay in the processing, we will notify you. Be aware that calculations can take up to 4 months to complete. And once everything has been completed and finalized, we will mail you your notice of estimated retirement benefit, which will provide you with your gross annual and gross monthly benefit amounts, along with the option that you chose. Regardless of when your first payment is issued, all payments are retroactive to your date of retirement. Now, one thing that is incredibly important to remember is that you have 60 days from your date of separation to file a retirement application and still be paid retroactive to your separation from service. If your retirement application is received more than 60 days after your separation from service, be aware that your retirement date will move to 15 days from the date we receive your application. So just remember that you need to get your completed application in within 60 days of your separation from service in order to be paid retroactive to your date of retirement. Sometimes your first check will be a paper check versus a direct deposit. When we mail your final paperwork, we will let you know whether or not that very first payment will be in the form of a paper check versus a direct deposit. So you will know which form that payment will be made at the time we pay you. Just a few things to consider about direct deposit. It is mandatory. Your monthly retirement allowance is transferred to your bank account on the last business day of each month. You will not receive a monthly statement each month. However, you will receive a monthly statement when there is a change to the amount of your retirement allowance, when we need to notify all retirees of an announcement, and we also mail a statement every December as your year-end summary. Now we have our true or false question. After I retire, I can go back to work with my school district or other Massachusetts employer without any restrictions. Well, obviously that is false. As an MTRS retiree, you will be subject to time and earnings restrictions if you are reemployed by a Massachusetts public employer. At this point, I'll take some questions if there are any.
All right, great, John. First question is, I provided services as a contractor for a public school before the MTRS. Are these hours creditable for buyback?
So the question is whether or not service rendered as a contract would be eligible for purchase. We won't know until the service is actually documented. So if you had service rendered in that capacity with a public employer, then you would want to complete the other Mass Public Service Purchase Form. Then once that form comes in, we'll review the information and then we'll have a better idea of whether or not that service would be eligible. There could be some follow-up required of that, but the first step would be to document that service on the other Mass Service Purchase Form, and then we can take a look.
Great. Next question. How do I know if I am registered under Retirement Plus?
Well, the best way to verify that is to contact us. So we can take a look in the system and review all the necessary information for us to be able to tell you whether or not you do have an official election into Retirement Plus. So you would definitely want to contact us so we could verify that for you.
Next question. Are you locked into your survivor, or can you change it after submitting your paperwork?
So is this this sounds like a question that's relative to a beneficiary, changing a beneficiary? You can change it depends what option you're choosing. At any point after retirement, you can change an option A or an option B beneficiary. The same does not go if you chose option C. You can only name one option C beneficiary when you apply for retirement. Once you're retired, that option C beneficiary remains. If that option C beneficiary were to predecease the retiree, then the retiree would pop up to option A at that point.
Great, thank you. Next question is, do we pay state and federal taxes when we collect monthly benefits? And what if we move to a different state?
I'm actually going to be covering that in a few slides, so I'll save that for when I get to that point.
Terrific, great. Last question for now. How does a DRO work?
So if there is a DRO in effect, our legal unit would get a draft of that DRO. At that point, the DRO will be reviewed. It'll either be approved or not approved. If it's approved and the court executed document gets to us, we will follow the terms of the domestic relations order. And there are a number of different ways that could go depending on the language. Okay, so now we'll be getting into some post-retirement issues and things to consider. The first being working after retirement. So there are no limits whatsoever if you're a retiree and you're collecting your benefit and you're reemployed in the private sector, or if you're employed in another state, regardless of whether it's public or private, or you're employed within the federal government. In either of these cases, there are no limits on the number of hours you can work, or there are no earnings limits. The type of employment that has the restrictions is all mass public sector employment. So here are some things to consider. If you're returning to the same employer from which you retired, there is a 60-day window. So you must be separated from service for at least 60 days before returning to the same employer from which you retired. That 60-day window, however, is waived if you retired at a minimum age of 62 or you retired at the maximum 80%. The two restrictions involve time and earnings, and it's whichever one you hit first. So you cannot exceed 1,200 hours in a calendar year. And you also have earnings restrictions where you can't your earnings cannot exceed the difference between the current salary of the position from which you retired and the amount of your annual pension. I'll get into an example in a minute. But after you've been retired for one full January through December calendar year, you can add $15,000 to your earnings limit. So here's an example of Mary Educator. She's retiring June 30th, 2023 from a position that paid $77,000 per year. The following school year comes around and she wants to go back to work. At that point in time, had she still been in the position she retired from, she would have been earning $79,000. Her gross annual MTRS pension is $50,175. So the difference is Mary's allowable earnings for the rest of calendar year 2023. And then as of January 1st of 2025, that limit can be increased by $15,000 per year. There are other things that could come into play when it comes to working after retirement. And many people have probably heard of these critical shortage waivers. Those waivers have to be approved by DESE. Elementary and secondary education must approve these waivers. In order for someone who retires under Retirement Plus to work under these waivers, they must be retired for at least 2 years. The waivers are 1-year waivers, so the district must apply to DESE in order to obtain the 1-year waiver for that specific position. If that criteria is met, the retiree may work without any earnings limits or hourly limits for the duration of the critical shortage waiver. A common question is whether or not post-retirement employment as a consultant or a leased employee is subject to the restrictions? And the answer is yes. Even in those capacities, you're still bound by the service and earnings restrictions. You do, however, have the ability to waive or freeze your benefit within a calendar year if you're approaching your earnings or service limits. So if you're working after retirement and you know that prior to the end of that calendar year, you're going to be reaching your limits, but you still want to remain employed in that position, you can contact us and elect to freeze, put a temporary hold on your retirement benefit and still continue in that employment capacity. If you do exceed the allowable limits, either the MTRS or your employer must recover all of the excess earnings. So just be careful when it comes to calculating your earnings limits each year. Now, here we are, the question that we had earlier, taxation of your retirement benefit. Your retirement allowance is not subject to Massachusetts state income tax if you're living in Massachusetts as a retiree. However, it is federally taxable. Some of you, when you retire, will have after-tax earnings in your annuity savings account. By having after-tax earnings in your annuity savings account, you're reducing the taxable portion of your retirement benefit each year. So you do get a slight break on the federal side. Now, post-tax dollars consist of retirement contributions made to our system prior to 1988, or if you've made any, if you've had any service purchases, any purchase made with a personal check would be considered after-tax money. So some of you may get a slightly reduced taxable earning amount when you're retired. If you do move out of state, you will want to check with the Department of Revenue in that particular state to determine whether or not your Mass public pension is subject to state income tax. I always tell people just to go to that state's website, the Department of Revenue website, and they should have information on there on how they would tax a Mass public pension in that state. By the end of January of each year, we will mail you what's called the 1099-R form. It's basically the equivalent of a W-2 that you were receiving while you were prior to retirement and employed. And then every other year, the MTRS will send you a benefit verification form to verify that you are still alive, and this is to prevent pension fraud, and your notarized signature is required when you get that form to complete. I don't believe that actually is still the case any longer. So now it is just a witness that is required, so you can disregard the notarized signature. I apologize for that. Okay, another popular topic has to do with how your Mass public pension could impact Social Security benefits. So there are two double dipping laws that you need to keep in mind. The one impacts your own Social Security benefit, and that double dipping law is known as the windfall elimination provision, or the WEP. You would be exempt from the windfall elimination provision if you were eligible to retire prior to January 1st, 1986. Fairly difficult to do, obviously, so that would mean that you would have needed 20 years of service credit prior to January 1st of 86, or you were at least 55 years old with at least 10 years of service credit. The only other way to be exempt from the WEP if you had 30 years of substantial earnings under Social Security. So if you were not exempt from the WEP, there will be a modified reduction formula applied to your Social Security calculation. I believe the maximum reduction for 2023 is at $584. And the reduction is based on your total years of substantial earnings. So the more years of substantial earnings you have under Social Security, the less severe the reduction is under the WEP. The second double dipping law is when you're trying to collect Social Security benefit through a spouse, and that is the government pension offset, or the GPO. It's almost impossible to be exempt because, as you can see, you had to have been eligible to retire prior to December 1st, 1982. So if you are someone who's looking to qualify for a Social Security benefit under a spouse, it's highly unlikely that you will be eligible to do that. There is a 2/3 offset that Social Security would look at. So they would take 2/3 of your gross monthly teacher's pension and match it up against the amount that you normally would have been eligible for through a spouse. If 2/3 of your MTRS benefit is at or above what you would have received as a spousal benefit, then that spousal benefit would be eliminated. There is more information in the booklet or in the guide that you were sent. I believe it's on page 42 for more info on that. One thing to realize, however, your Medicare benefits are not impacted whatsoever by either double dipping law. So if you are impacted by the WEP or the GPO, that will not have a negative effect on your Medicare eligibility. And you also want to make sure that you contact Social Security prior to turning 65 to find out your eligibility for Medicare and when you would need to apply for Part B. And last but not least, there are cost of living adjustments that may occur once you retire. Now, you need to be retired for at least one full fiscal year before you're eligible for your first COLA, fiscal year being July through June period. So, for example, if someone retires June 30th of 2023, they would not be eligible for a COLA until July of 2024. They're not guaranteed year to year because they are part of the annual budget process, and they have to be approved and voted on by the Mass Legislature. So it is dependent upon a vote of the Mass Legislature. And currently, the COLA is based on 3% or the Consumer Price Index, whichever is less, on the first $13,000 of your retirement allowance. So right now, the maximum COLA per year is $390. So that concludes our presentation today. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and I believe we have time for some questions.
Okay, thank you, John. Couple of questions from the chat. The first one is, how do I buy back time that I worked as a para?
Okay. Again, if you were a member of the local retirement board and that money was transferred over to us already, you would not need to purchase that service. That is something that you can certainly check with us on. If you are not contributing to a local board based on that time, then you would want to complete our subservice part-time service purchase form. So your employer at that point would want to document that time on that form, and you would want to submit that to us.
Great, thank you. Next question. On the application, what if you are not currently employed by a school district? What would you write on line 1?
So the question is, if you are not currently employed,
What would you put on line 1?
I believe on that page, there was a box for you would check off as being inactive. So you would just inactive, and then you would just in the other credible service section, we would see who your last employer was. And even when if you're inactive, obviously you're still sending Part 2 to the last employer. So even if you were inactive for a number of years, you would still be sending a Part 2 to your last employer.
Next question. If we are required to use June 30 as the retirement date, how does this affect my benefit if I have a July birthday?
Okay, that's a great question. So your retirement date if you're just finishing off the school year and now you're all done, your last date of employment would be June 30th, but your date of retirement would be right on your actual birthday. So your birthday would be your retirement date in that case.
I received my amount to buy back and I will retire in 1.5 years. Do I have to pay lump sum or can I spread that out over a year?
In any case, your service must be purchased in full prior to your retirement date. So you can certainly start off by making one installment payment, but prior to your actual retirement date, if you were looking to purchase the remainder of that time, you would need to contact us and get a buyout cost and pay for it before your retirement date.
Okay, one more question. Are there any restrictions on employment with a private employer after retirement?
Private employment is not subject to either the earnings or time restrictions. So you're good to go if you're employed in the private sector.
Great, well, that's all the questions from the chat, and that's going to conclude our program for today. Thank you for joining us and have a great afternoon.